Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. My name is Amri Johnson, your host. I hope you're well. Join me as we continue to deconstruct the shortcomings of traditional DEI strategies and co-create a vision for more transformative, human-centered approaches to inclusion. Myself and my esteemed guests will challenge the status quo, dive deep into the reactive, supplemental nature of many DEI initiatives. We'll explore how to reclaim the profound and transformational potential of inclusion as a catalyst for collective growth, empowerment, and organizational change. Season 2 of the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast starts now. Welcome to the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. This is Amri Johnson, your host. This is the last episode of Season 2 of the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast. So I'm going to do a few things. I'm going to do a recap of Season 2, things that stood out for me, things that I learned, things that changed me. I'm going to talk about the current stance, or my current stance, on the state of inclusion, or DEI, for those that prefer that acronym, which will bring me back to Chicken Little from Season 1. The sky is still not falling. I'm going to talk a little bit about manipulative under-specification. This is a term I learned from Johnny Thompson from Big Think. It's an idea which I think is part of what's going on, so that will tie back a little bit to my current stance. Then I'm going to talk about skin in the game. I also talk about that in Season 1, but I live by it every day. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about now what and what to expect in Season 3. So let's get started. I had many amazing guests this season, and each of them taught me something new. We started with Dr. Jonathan Ashong-Lamptey in episode 1. He's known for evidence-based inclusion. He has the longest running inclusion podcast in the world, and it's been listened to by more than 100 people in 160 countries. It was fitting to have him at the beginning of 2024, and we've been in continuous dialogue since then, both on and offline. We've talked about where the space, the field, the industry of diversity, equity, and inclusion were going. And what we concluded more than anything is this: if you're serious about this work, don't stop. Now is not the time to stop. We discussed the struggle, and we've discussed why we are where we are right now. We talk about the fact that much of what we're seeing is a natural market correction, and the reality that the extremes from the Trump administration have slowed all people in organization work down significantly. The uncertainty for many executives and organizational senior leadership was halting. We talked about the path forward for organizations that still see inclusion as central to how people and culture thrive. It's about getting beyond food, flags, and fun, as Jonathan talks about frequently. These things are nice to have, but not a case or a path to making inclusion part of the way things get done around here, or culture. Dr. Jonathan is pushing the envelope on inclusion. There are a few people out there with his depth and ability to break down inclusion topics with constructs that are accessible for a CEO or a CFO in particular, because he's a former chartered accountant, so he knows CFOs. Another very influential episode featured Fred Falker. Fred happens to be part of the guest faculty for the Emergent Inclusion Experience, live and online. Fred has a powerful TED Talk where he talks about the lines we draw, about difference. He's shifting the paradigm to go from difference to distance. The lines of difference we draw can be acknowledged and even respected, Fred says, but to attach to them as real doesn't serve us and hasn't served the current DEI paradigm. Fred's wisdom has stayed with me since our first conversation. Why has that happened? Mostly because what he said, starting with our initial dialogue, was that DEI paradigm of focusing on differences has never worked. It has rarely to never created a sense of mattering and belonging, and it is not constructed to do so. It's a conversation I've had with very few practitioners because most of us have anchored on the paradigm of difference so intently that breaking from it, even conceptually, causes cognitive dissonance. In terms of the next evolution of the field, industry, and practice, Fred has been around this for decades. So Fred suggests focusing not on what people are, but who they are. If we do that, we can move forward. If we just focus on what, that's not an inclusion path. Fred's work and insights were very much in alignment with the conversation I had in season 1, episode 6, with Doctors David and Sabrina Smith, who are both philosophers and happen to be married. Sabrina and David are race abolitionists. Their clarity about what race is and isn't, I have to be honest, changed me in a profound way. I can't go back to thinking about race as something worth holding on to. Fred reinforces that when he talks about the boxes that we create that aren't real, the lines that we draw that aren't real. David and Sabrina says, wherever race goes, racism follows. So should we understand the historical roots of race and racism? Absolutely. Is continuing to hold on to race as if it's real, helping mitigate the insidiousness of racism and racial superiority? Absolutely not. Thus, my pivot toward race abolitionism has been solidified. So between the work of David and Sabrina, the conversation with Fred, I was determined to go deeper, and that's what my conversation with Dr. Sheena Michelle Mason did. The focus that we've had for the past 2 years, since I'd say after Floyd, on anti-racism in the Kendi and DiAngelo sense, wasn't resonating with me for quite some time. In fact, I engaged organizations as they were in their anti-racism phases. In the binary Kendian sense most of them were taking, it didn't work for me, but I was very deliberate about listening and using inquiry as well as consistently reiterating principles of interdependence, solidarity, and things such as intergroup contact theory theoretically. I was and still in a way am perpetually concerned about how this trajectory would turn out. I'm still concerned, but now I'm watching it turn out. It hasn't turned out well. We can conclude that racialization is at the heart of it. The focus on fault finding by race, which too frequently was the case, has in many ways led to an allergic reaction to DEI that came into fruition starting in 2022-23. It's happened in a significant way by people racialized as Black and racialized as white and otherwise. I'm not saying that the anti-DEI train was hopped on in good faith with a desire to see a different way forward. And it's important that we acknowledge the flaws with the predominant way of practice that many had. But there is no doubt that racialization is a key component of the vitriol that we've seen, along with the political expedience that it provided. In episode 11, our last published episode in June, I was blown away by the depth of Dr. Mason. Her depth confirmed that, like the subtitle of her book, The Raceless Anti-Racist, I believe that the future of anti-racism is ending race. It's racelessness. Sheena's work is a compelling journey into what that means, and her Togetherness Wayfinder is a path to how. If you haven't checked out that episode, I highly recommend it. That conversation, to me, honestly, it changed me in ways that I still can't fully explain. What I will hope for in season 3 is to have more conversations about race abolitionism with a panel of people that have depth on race and racism, as Dr. Mason frames it, to talk about the implications and possibilities of a raceless construct. Let me talk a little bit about the current state and my current stance on inclusion, which brings me back to season 1, episode 8, where I talked about Chicken Little and used it as in a way, an example of how we've reacted to the discourse that's been anti-DEI. Look, this has been a tremendously challenging year. 2025 has. 24 wasn't that significantly easier, but a lot less friction than we're seeing now. Right now, business has slowed since the beginning of 2025, and it's slowed in an abrupt and jarring way, and that has to be acknowledged. It's not just DEI work, but organizational development work in general in the USA and even in Europe, where my focus has been slowly growing over the past several years, given my business is based and I reside in Switzerland. It's all slowed down. I was in the US over the past couple weeks. My mother is 84 years old. She's very fit, but still, she's growing older. So we really needed to be there, and I need her to have time with my son and have that time with his grandmother. It's vital to me. So we make that trip, and it's a sacrifice financially, but it's one that I have to make right now. And so I was there, and I also, of course, have my truest and longest standing friendships in the US, as well as, of course, my niece, Jasmine, who I raised, is there too. Here's what I experienced. It was anxiety. It was just the first time this year I started experiencing anxiety back in January after that abrupt dynamic that happened in the US around the DEI work. For many, probably most of my colleagues, and a lot of us lost our livelihood and our jobs. And while I was in the US, or particularly when I returned from our trip, my wife and my step twins and my son, they left the next day to Spain to see my wife's family. The night they departed, that similar feeling that I had for the first few months of 2024 returned. What that told me, or really reminded me of, because many of my friends have shared it, was that the anxiety I was and still occasionally feel is present in the psyche of many people in the US. I think it's less so here in Switzerland, where chocolate and cheese still flow, according to the stereotypes. But it doesn't mean that the world changes based on AI doomerism and matter-of-fact statements about replacing humans, along with layoffs that have included even European multinationals. Don't affect us here in Switzerland. It's all affecting us. The US dynamic, the US tenor, the US tone affects the world. What has changed less than I would like to see is the conversation about the work of DEI. While people might be quote unquote right, even though rightness has never transformed anything, they might be right about the nature of Project 2025. They might be right about Stephen Miller's white nationalist leanings. They might be right about dehumanizing language about immigrants. And of course, the attack on DEI. Here's the reality. And I go back to this. Much of it is about, or all about, racialization. As the conversation about race has been amplified on sides of the right and left in the USA, to continue engaging in a conversation from one angle of racialization versus the other is similar to the trap Foxy Loxy set for Chicken Little's foul collective. Again, I went back to that episode where I talked about Chicken Little and the attack on DEI. There's this notion called manipulative underspecification. Let me talk a little bit about what I mean by that. It's a term I learned from Johnny Thompson from Big Think via his mini philosophy Substack. It means to say enough about something, but say nothing at the same time and let people fill in the blanks. Make America great again is one of those phrases that reeks of manipulative underspecification. Make it great for whom? How? And compared to what? What does it mean? That's the point. People react in different ways based on whether the mean phrase or slogan, manipulatively underspecified, occurs as potentially beneficial or disadvantageous, whether it affirms their identity and status or threatens it. Think about it. Who does MAGA, in this example, really help? Those who never specifically say what they mean, but they hint enough to make cognitive connections for those, the coded message is intended for. Foxy Loxy, the antagonist of the story who convinces Chicken Little to spin the fowl of the coop into a frenzy and run into Foxy's cave trap, where they become his all-in-one buffet of chicken, duck, turkey, and geese, used manipulative underspecification. The sky is falling. Well, why is the sky falling? How is it affecting us? Is it falling for everybody? In what ways is it falling? What does the sky falling mean? DEI is under attack was the sky falling moment for DEI practitioners, and we reacted in a way very similar to what people hoped we would. We went directly opposite and gave an equal energy to something that only created contention, not transformation. In the case of the majority of anti-DEI activists, they say and make reference to things like critical race theory or anti-racism, but they never clearly say why it's wrong beyond cherry-picked grievances based on a scattering of bad practices. Never do Rufo or others like Robbie Starbuck, and even the shadow VP, Stephen Miller, offer clear explanations as to DEI's flaws. Sure, exceptional cases are used to confirm tribal biases, but never do these so-called anti-DEI activists lay out specifics from CRT writings as to why it's wrong. It's only a barrage of demonizing DEI or CRT without a willingness to engage in debate about its pros and cons. The most famous opponents of DEI have never debated with anyone who has expertise on DEI or CRT, critical race theory. And this won't happen because it might reveal the myriad rhetorical holes and reveal true intentions. I personally find issues with critical race theory. I'm willing to acknowledge Crenshaw and Bell's contributions to the dialogue they created, its usefulness and its flaws. The anti-DEI crowd deliberately doesn't do this and won't, because the tactic is manipulative underspecification. It works for politics because the majority of people targeted are not prone to believing something else. And for the media, it sells. 99% of those who consider themselves anti-DEI activists have never practiced inclusion, diversity, or anything of the sort. Such bad faith actors won't engage with anyone who has depth in the space, because that means acknowledgement that the anti-DEI game is just that. It's a game for personal benefit, to sustain the hustle, to keep it going for as long as it reaps benefits, for as long as it remains visible, viable, and victorious in the minds of the ideologically captured. There is little substance to the anti-DEI arguments yet, because of how many DEI advocates frame and continue to frame or reframe diversity and inclusion as social justice. The narrative will remain clouded. There's a place for social justice. I personally don't believe it belongs in companies, not because it's unimportant, but because it occurs as social for some, but not for everyone. And inclusion, if it has integrity, is for everyone and must be connoted and practiced as such for it to be made a way of being, seeing, and doing in organizational life. I believe justice does belong in organizations. I believe in justice, but not for the cause of a particular group identity. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said in his letter from a Birmingham jail, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. If there's a lack of interdependence in organizational life that leads people to not getting what they need to thrive, all are impacted negatively. Doesn't always seem like that in the moment, but if you ever watched unfairness take root or were complicit in perpetuating it as a bystander, there's a high likelihood that you eventually were caught in the consequences of bad outcomes over time. If we as practitioners continue to react to the racialized political rhetoric and actions as if the energy were directed at a particular group, usually the target is men racialized as white. If we continue to direct our energy like this, we'll miss the opportunity to start turning the corner away from a racialized angle. I don't see any solidarity in the ability to move together in good faith as being possible for those who have been exposed to the rhetoric, even if it has only tangentially influenced them. That means if the rhetoric of racialization keeps coming forth from practitioners, many people who might otherwise be in solidarity won't be. I'm not saying that race isn't important, that we don't need to understand its historical construct, but to focus on racialization as our key way of doing inclusion work, I just don't see it getting us very far. I'm open to talking about what that means. Sometimes when we ask my son Kai if he likes a food that he's less familiar with or he tries it, he'll eat 1 or 2 bites and then he'll say, yeah, I like it, but not too much. I'm not sure if we're raising a politician or not, but after that, he'll rarely try more of the thing that he tried. So I have to believe, perhaps with a certain amount of naivety, but not too much, that most people, Americans and beyond in the world, do not look at people racialized other than white as less than human or bad or unworthy of dignity and respect. I do believe that some quote unquote white people feel like they have been attacked. Others feel paternalistically that protecting Black lives, quote unquote, is something to hold as noble. I get it. And the intention is positive. Yet, the journey is one where allyship, what it needs to be, I would say. The journey is where allyship is a relationship that it's two-way. It's not an asymmetrical dynamic that can occur as paternalistic. We are allies in solidarity for a world where people, all people, are treated with the utmost dignity and respect. And at least at work, and hopefully and aspirationally beyond the organizational context in our communities, neighborhoods, cities, and countries, dignity and respect is central. And that all of us, when I say us, I'm saying we, saying the majority of people in the world want to see that. So here's my point in stating this and wrapping up where I see the space right now. It's skin in the game. I've been critical of DEI because I have deep skin in the game. I talked about this in season 1, episode 10, quoting Nassim Taleb: erudition without bullshit, intellect without cowardice, courage without imprudence, mathematics without nerdiness, scholarship without academia, intelligence without shrewdness, religion without intolerance, and above all, nothing without skin in the game. I go back to that quote a lot. I have almost 25 years of skin in this game. Skin in the game is about having something to lose when you're wrong. In the case of DEI, many of us with consulting firms, even those in OD who don't formally do inclusion and diversity work, have been impacted, especially those of us where inclusion and diversity is our primary source of revenue. We have skin in the game. Others less so, perhaps not at all. There are over 230 laws of Hammurabi. If you never heard of Hammurabi's code, you should look it up. In the law that Hammurabi talks about, he talks about that of the builder. And he says if a structure collapses and kills the inhabitant, the builder would be put to death. If the structure kills the inhabitant's son, the builder would be put to death. That's skin in the game. I know that's an extreme, but the reality is if we're building something, if we believe that it's true, we're willing to take the consequences of whatever comes from it. That's skin in the game. It's not comfortable, but if you have it, you make rigor and integrity central to what you do. In fact, if you do it long enough, even when things get tough, like they've been for many inside and outside of this field, you develop what Talib calls soul in the game. It's another level of skin, a deeper commitment. It means you take responsibility for the outcomes, even if there were other factors that came into it. It means that you're thinking about all potential trade-offs that might come with an approach. I don't feel like we've done that to the extent that we could, and we don't have a choice going forward, but to make sure that we do. Soul in the game. Someone with soul in the game continues to care about outcomes even when they're not being directly monitored or when the immediate incentives are removed. It's the difference between a professional who does quality work because they might get sued versus one who does quality work because they can't bear to have their name associated with something substandard. While skin in the game provides external discipline, soul in the game provides internal drive. Talib suggests the combination creates the most robust and ethical systems. People need both the external consequences and the internal commitment to consistently make good decisions and benefit the whole. Now what? The field of inclusion and diversity requires more people internal to companies, practitioners and non-practitioners, with soul in the game about creating the conditions for everyone to thrive. We have to make this a reality now. Time's up. Remember this. So-called opponents don't want it. They don't want DEI to go away. They just want it to continuously and favorably, they just want it continuously and favorably framed around something that's vague and amorphous to most people. The sky is still not falling. The path is uncertain, but our footing becomes more grounded as we develop greater skin and soul in the game. Building inclusive cultures that work for everyone and where all can make their best contributions to the organizational mission. Season 3 of the Reconstructing Inclusion podcast will be focused on opening up dialogue about a way forward in the diversity and inclusion space that's focused more on who we are than what we ascribe to one another. It will be about shifting patterns and practices we've come to adhere to in the space, examining them with fresh eyes in the current climate. It will be about principles the work has revolved around and why and what principles we might need to consider anew. It will be about exploring our thinking, how we are making meaning of our workplaces and the world around us in the most curious ways we can. We will explore Alfred Korbisky's idea that the map is not the territory. We'll talk about relational fitness and what it means to truly care about people in an interdependent way, how we listen with skill, openly learn, create the conditions that allow colleagues to know they matter, and how to surface the stories that will allow workplaces to move deeper into the world of AI, leading with our common humanity. So that's a wrap for season 2. Thank you for staying with me through this journey of reconstructing inclusion. I hope this was helpful. Make it a great day. Peace. If you are committed or simply a little bit curious about how to make DEI accessible to everyone, actionable, that is, unambiguously prioritized and sustainable, aligned with personal and organizational purpose, hit the subscribe button. Make it a great day. Peace.